I'm also on the board of JFAS. We are really delighted today to be able to have Dr. Miriam Elman with us, who's going to be speaking on assessing the post-October 7th campus landscape. Dr. Elman will speak about the conditions impacting Jewish and openly Zionist students and faculty on U.S. campuses after October 7th, and her work with the Academic Engagement Network, often referred to as AEN, in supporting faculty nationwide. Dr. Elman has served since 2019 as Executive Director of AEN, an educational nonprofit that builds nationwide networks of university faculty and administrators to counter antisemitism and advance the Academy's principles of open inquiry and free expression. Before taking on her position at AEN, she was a tenured associate professor of political science at Syracuse University, where she held the title of Robert D. McClure Professor of Teaching Excellence in the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. She is an alumna of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where she received a BA, and Columbia University, where she got a PhD. Dr. Elman previously taught at Arizona State University and spent a number of years as a fellow at Harvard University's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. She is an award-winning scholar and teacher, has edited 7 books, and is the author of nearly 100 peer-reviewed articles and essays. Dr. Elman has delivered hundreds of campus and community guest lectures and has been frequently featured in Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post, the New York Times, the Times of Israel, Washington Post, Inside Higher Education, the Chronicle of Higher Education, the Allgemeiner, JNS, Jewish Journal, J Weekly, and The Forward, among other media outlets. In recognition of her work, she was recently listed by the Allgemeiner among the top 100 people worldwide who are positively influencing Jewish life. We're going to have now Dr. Miriam Elman present her talk, and she does have a PowerPoint. And when she is done, we should have ample time for people to raise their hands. I can call on you, and Miriam will be happy to answer questions and have a conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for that introduction, and thank you to JFAS for everything you're doing at Rutgers and beyond. At AEN, we've been following your work. Really impressive. We've been following it for some time, and many of you are members of AEN, a number of you on this call, and be delighted to have others of you join the network if you're interested. What Cynthia asked me to do for about a half an hour is to flag some key trends that we in the leadership team and the staff of AEN are seeing since October 7th. And some of the incidents and examples that I'll mention may be ones that you're familiar with, others you may not be as familiar with. And before I start, I just wanted to say a few words about AEN. And Cynthia started in the introduction that we are an independent educational nonprofit. We are entering our 10th year. I was among the first 20 founding faculty members of AEN back in 2015. Today we have faculty in all disciplines, all ranks on over 320 campuses in the US. AEN only operates in the United States, by the way. So it is a national organization, very eclectic, nonpartisan. We're not a Jewish organization. We're not a pro-Israel advocacy organization. And the mission is up on the screen. We don't engage in litigation. So faculty who feel they may have a lawsuit or may have a complaint that's of a legal nature, we will refer faculty to other partner organizations. We also don't engage on the Hill. We don't engage in legislation or political lobbying. And we tend to sort of stay in our lane, that is US campuses and the US Academy, and we leave like off-campus arenas to other organizations. And one of the things that we do is we provide a lot of resources to members, because many of our members, and we have about 1,200 across the country at the moment. Many of them are not in Israel studies, they're not in Jewish studies, they may be in bioengineering, um, or some other field. And so we provide a lot of expertise, webinars, short courses, city convenings, other programs. And what we want to try to do is help our members learn from each other, right? And best practices from one another. And so your own Cynthia Zaltzman actually just wrote a terrific pamphlet for us on the goings on at the AAA in her field of anthropology. And it'll be helpful for members now dealing with academic boycotts in their own professional associations to have a look at this pamphlet. And they're all up on our website. And a few years ago, we launched an initiative to educate administrators, mid-level administrators, deans, provosts, vice presidents, diversity and inclusion and belonging officials. And we developed a series of trainings and workshops, again, utilizing our faculty network and expertise. And to date, we've delivered to over 5,000 officials, university administrators with this content. And on the slide, there's a screenshot of an op-ed that those administrators that went to Israel with us wrote an op-ed about their experiences and how it impacted the way they address the campus climate after October 7th. And really going to Israel and going also into the West Bank, visiting with Palestinian scholars and Israeli scholars really made an impact on them. And made them realize that dialogue was possible, even in the most difficult of situations. Now we have a wait list for our programs, and we have to turn people away, but we will make room for a Rutgers administrator next year, if you know of any who would like to join us on this year-long exploration. So with that, let's just dive in. We're finishing up the fall semester, and actually, if you look across the country, I know you're facing a lot of issues at Rutgers at the moment, but if you look across the country, actually things are a lot better than they were last year. And we were going into this academic year kind of cautiously optimistic. Overall, the campuses have been calmer, less disruptive, even though on a few there have been some fairly harsh and obnoxious rhetoric. Some campaigns are extreme. I'll get into that in a minute, but a lot of schools spent the summer reviewing policies, revising codes of conduct, and particularly these TPM, or time, place, and manner restrictions on protests and demonstrations. And so you may have heard that all of Cal State, all of the University of California, that's hundreds of thousands of students in those two systems, over the summer put into place new policies: no overnight encampments, no blocking public pathways, no masking to shield your identity while violating a university policy. And many campuses just adopted that. They saw what the California campuses, the public universities were doing, and then they adopted that. There's also been suspensions of student chapters at Columbia, at Tufts. Actually, the courts have upheld those suspensions. And then the other thing that's interesting, it's not just university leaders. What we are seeing and what student-facing organizations are saying, and AEN is part of a consortium or a coalition where we get to talk to 50 other student-facing and alumni-facing organizations. And so we can hear from them on a weekly basis. And what they're saying is that students are just fed up. They're just not going to tolerate what happened, particularly last spring. And they're not going to tolerate divisive tactics, intimidation, harassment by their peers. And so development at University of Michigan, which is important, I think, is a bellwether for this. I spoke to a reporter about it, that, students are just not, they're just not going to take the nonsense anymore from their peers. And I think that's indicative of a trend. And it's a good thing, because you really want students to take back their campuses. It's not just the administrators, but the students to stand up to their peers and say, this isn't the type of culture, this isn't the type of atmosphere that we want. This isn't the type of learning that we've come to expect here. And, we're not going to tolerate it from you. So the other development, and you may have heard about this at NYU, NYU released a revised code of conduct also over the summer. And what's interesting about it is that it is very explicit in stating that that targeting Jews may violate its non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies if Zionism is used as a code word. So like if it's used as a racial dog whistle to exclude Jews from open NYU activities, for example. And NYU has explained its guidance, it's released subsequent statements, that the idea is to really comply with the law, right? It's namely Title VI and its obligations under Title VI in the Civil Rights Act, so that discriminatory, exclusionary, harassing conduct is not going to be shielded simply by using Zionist as a substitute for Jew or as a substitute for Israeli. And this is a first, and it's a private university, but guess what? The public university of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, just adopted the same exact policy. So again, sort of covering Jews who are openly Zionist from being targeted by discrimination and harassment, and making that very, very explicit. So that is all very reassuring, but we do need to see more enforcement of these policies, consequences, and disciplinary charges that stick, which has still been a bit patchy this fall, but a lot better than it was last year. And I would say that I think there's a certain fatigue that is set in. There's also other issues to address, with the election, so interests have moved elsewhere to some extent, but at the same time, we are seeing some hostile rhetoric on some campuses, and we are still seeing efforts to disrupt campus activities. So we know that last year was very painful. It was a challenging year. Many Jewish Zionist students have long said they feel a lack of psychological safety. But last year, this escalated to feeling physically unsafe. And that was very new. So, you may have heard that at Berkeley, Jewish students reported for months that they did not feel safe to walk across their campus, that they did not want to come physically onto the campus. And one of our longtime members, Ron Hassner, at Berkeley, he decided he was going to camp out in his office for 2 weeks and leave a light on as a beacon for his students, and they could come to his office physically. And we had a conversation, and he told me, Miriam, drastic times require drastic actions. I would have never have done this in the past, but this was just a very drastic time. And we know that in polling, we have a lot of polling that came out last year. We still have good polling also coming out this semester as well. But we know from a lot of this polling that students are describing feeling physically unsafe. So they're fearing for their emotional well-being. They're fearing that they have to hide their identity. There'll be social penalties if they are outed as pro-Israel, if they're outed as Zionists. But on top of that, the encampments in particular, they were describing, and in surveys, they were saying they were feeling physically unsafe. So we have heard a lot about the insults, threats, harassment to Jewish and also Israeli students, and that is all true. But the threat to faculty is often overlooked, and we are a faculty organization, as you are. So I did want to just mention a couple of things. We don't really have great surveys of faculty. We've actually fielded one with a colleague at Rutgers, Kent Harbor, you may know, is in JFAS, worked with a colleague in Canada, the first of its kind faculty survey to assess how faculty think about anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias on their campuses. And there's another one that another organization is thinking of fielding as well for faculty, and ADL may do one as well. But we have a lot of anecdotal evidence. We're an organization, that it operates across the country, so we hear a lot of stories. And I just wanted to share with you, what happened to one of our faculty members in California. And it's not just that this happened to Jeff Blutinger, who's an American Jewish scholar. We have heard from faculty members that they don't feel safe going to their campuses. This was last year. They requested accommodations to move their classes online. Jeff Blutinger is not Israeli. He's not a government official. He's not in the IDF. He's just a professor of Jewish studies. And like he's done all his career, he was invited to give a talk about his work and peace and coexistence. And first he was smeared online as a Zionist who had no right to speak. And this was an online kind of Instagram campaign. And it rose to the level where our cybersecurity team alerted us to it, said, we understand you have a faculty member who is going to give a talk at Cal State. They are calling to shut it down. You may want to alert campus security, which we did. And campus security actually brought local law enforcement in, which you can see in the screen. They decided there was enough of a threat that he could not continue his talk. And so that event was full-blown disrupted and ended after 20 minutes. And he had to be escorted out and to the airport by police. He later wrote about it and said it was the first time he was ever in a police car. He was in a police car 3 times that day, and he had never in his life been in a police car. So that, I don't think every faculty is experiencing that, but it does give you a taste of what we're experiencing, and these incidents keep popping up. A few weeks ago, it was at University of Rochester, which is just down the road, down the highway from where I live, about an hour's drive, where there were these wanted posters that were plastered. And you can see on the slide, this is one area, and it's plastered in a tunnel. It snows out here a lot, so there's tunnels to go through for the campus community, so you don't have to go through the snow. But tunnels like that evokes what's going on in Gaza, and to have images of wanted posters, very, very concerning. And the administration did respond very swiftly. They condemned it. And now there's enforcement. people are, are not only facing from university policy, but also from law enforcement, local law enforcement. So, I think we're going to continue to face these kind of issues. It is something new for our faculty members, and I've been in AEN at the helm for 6 years. I've never heard these kinds of cases before. Um, and we have 13 sections and interest groups in AEN. They're disciplinary, they're geographical. This past year, they morphed into like group therapy. People were saying they were coming to this section because they felt so traumatized and they needed that camaraderie. And maybe JFAS also serves that purpose on your campus, but we have heard that from so many of our faculty that it was really taking a toll on mental health. And some organizations are now providing some mental health for faculty. So a lot of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing on campuses isn't quite this. It's not, the ubiquitous part isn't the physical concerns. The ubiquitous part is the demands on Jews to be less fully Jewish in order to be socially accepted, right? That's the price of social acceptance, and that Jewish students face litmus tests that make it impossible for them to participate in campus life. And give you an example, at Stanford, students reportedly had to say FUCK Israel in order to gain entry into a student party. So it's like a shunning, and it was described in a report that a Stanford subcommittee on anti-Semitism released and was shared with AEN because our members co-chair and serve on it. But I've heard so many stories like that. I gave a talk at Tufts last spring, and a Jewish student came up afterwards, and she said she had to leave a tap dancing class. So nothing about Israel. They didn't even do any Israeli dance. It was just a tap dancing club. And she had to leave because someone saw she had done an Instagram post that showed that she was pro-Israel and not anti-Palestinian. She says, I'm not anti-Palestinian. I support Palestinian rights and freedoms, and I'm horrified by the war. And I even wrote that in my post, but I also think Israel has a right to exist. And they told her she had to leave her tap dancing class. And I sent her to the Brandeis Center for Human Rights under law so they could log that incident of ostracism and discriminatory action. I tend to follow what goes on at Columbia because it's my alma mater. And last year in October, the leader of an LGBTQ club told Jewish peers in the club, you're not welcome here because it's free Palestine over here and you are a genocidal group of people. And she wrote that. Students write on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. They write these things and then they disseminate them. Sometimes they write on university official chat rooms so this was a public post, and she wrote, it's within my right as leader of this group to disinvite Zionists because Zionists are a genocidal group of people. And she was criticized. She didn't apologize. She doubled down and wrote, white Jewish people have always been the oppressors of brown people. And when I say the Holocaust wasn't special, I mean that because Israelis are Nazis. This is a Columbia student, right? And in my view, in a way, it's sort of like a form of compelled speech, and that might be a way to message it out to fellow colleagues, and because it's not just, you can't just be silent. You actually have to speak. You have to denounce Israel. You have to make a speech act that is demonizing Israel. You have to issue a loyalty oath that you are an anti-Zionist. So it's a pressure to speak a certain way and to demonstrate an allegiance to this prevailing anti-Israel orthodoxy. I have on the slide just from SUNY New Paltz. They were a subject of an Office of Civil Rights complaint, they do have a settlement, and they're doing better and improving the campus climate. But this example shows that there's demands on young Jewish students to be less fully Jewish, as the price of tolerance and acceptance is not new. Jews being told you can only be the kind of Jew that demonizes Israel and Zionism, right? So there's the good Jew and the bad Jew, and that really does predate October 7th, but got even worse. So I started by saying things are a little better, but in some respects, some of the anti-Israel groups and organizations are even more hostile now. It's just a fewer of them, and some of them have moved off campus. But we have seen this pick up and escalate this fall. It's now a full-blown campaign to try to kick Hillel off campus, because Hillel is viewed as a Zionist organization or supportive of Israel. And last year, we saw campuses like Drexel and University of California, Santa Barbara, Pitt, very different campuses, but they all supported this campaign to try to get the campuses to terminate the relationship with Hillel and to replace Hillel with a non-Zionist Jewish organization like Jewish Voice for Peace. And it's gotten a little bit more hostile, particularly CUNY at Baruch, where anti-Israel students and some community protesters have been coming together for some weeks this fall. And no fascists on campus, the fascists being Hillel, who they say should go to hell. And notice the inverted red triangle, where the superscript dot should be for the I on Hillel is the inverted red triangle that Hamas uses to identify its targets. So super obnoxious. We have seen these posters with Hillel and the inverted red triangle elsewhere, and on some campuses, administrators are telling students, quit it. We don't want to see that with the inverted red triangle. So we'll have to keep an eye on this. Hillel International has responded and is, certainly insisting that administrators not, entertain any of this and also speak out against it. I do want to say that that there is white supremacy on campus. That is not new. There's a photo here of a swastika carved into the snow outside a Jewish fraternity a few years ago at Syracuse University. We see flyers that are plastered on campuses accusing Jews of driving globalism, pushing multiculturalism, infiltrating the government, destroying white man's America. Swastikas are etched into bathroom stalls. So this is happening, and we need to pay attention to it. There are organizations, the watchdog organizations are monitoring this. ADL is monitoring it. Seems to be in the Midwest, white nationalist groups are trying, and activists are trying to gain ground in mainstream conservative circles on campus. So Federalist Society, FedSoc, right, or other conservative college Republicans, they're trying to see, can we gain access? And it is something that faculty on some of our campuses in Utah and Colorado and Wisconsin and are telling us that they are concerned about far-right anti-Semitism and what that means for their campuses. But the big difference, of course, is that this kind of anti-Semitism is not normalized. It's not mainstreamed. It's not accepted by faculty, certainly not accepted by administrators. And people speak out about it right away. Whereas the anti-Israel variant or the anti-Zionist expressions of anti-Semitism tend to be overlooked, poorly understood, sometimes even normalized. So we are hearing, from our faculty members, especially junior faculty, not tenured, contingent faculty, They say they have to hide their Zionism in order to succeed professionally, not in every discipline, but in some disciplines, if they're up for promotion, if they're up for tenure, they're telling us that they are scrubbing their CVs from prior work in Israel, research trips in Israel, or they're just taking that off their CVs before it goes up to the PNT committee. We are hearing self-censoring going on by Jewish faculty, by advanced graduate students. We do have PhD students, advanced PhDs, ABD students in our network, and they are telling us that they will not do Israel as a case study for their dissertation, for example. They don't want to have the field trip on their CV. And then the other, situation is like, what happens if you're a Zionist and your entire department adopts an anti-Zionist mission? And this past year, we saw academic departments taking formal stances on the Israel-Hamas war, which should be, for open discussion and debate, but not a formal stance of a department, where those who don't agree with it or think differently are going to be alienated, and certainly it chills dissent. But it's not new. Again, a lot of what we saw was just almost on hyperdrive rather than being new, because back in 2021, you had, dozens and dozens of gender studies departments, women and gender studies departments, like baking anti-Zionism into core mission statements. And of course, individual faculty can endorse, sign any petition, any open letter they want. But when departments that are units of the university are doing that, that's really problematic. It establishes a political orthodoxy as a department. So in AEN, we took that on for the last 4 years. Faculty members across the country have been speaking out about it. And particularly last year, we had some wins, interestingly. We had some wins where in Illinois and Colorado, where administrators agreed this is actually not right for departments to issue these kinds of one-sided statements, and they directed the faculty to do that under their own name, on their own, and not as departments. And they, in some cases, they wanted a disclaimer attached to the department statement. We also had success at the University of California. Always good when California, because it's such a big system, so it does have an impact, particularly on other public universities. The University of California Regents adopted a policy prohibiting political statements on department homepages, which is great. And University of Wisconsin-Madison just adopted the same policy. So it's going to be a lot harder for a department to issue an anti-Israel mission statement. And there are a number of other universities that are considering a similar policy, and they're relying on institutional neutrality, which is all the rage, as you know. Like, institutional neutrality is this huge trend, and we can use that for our own purposes. People who support academic freedom and are supporting institutional neutrality and want universities to adopt it. So if you care about institutional neutrality, you do not want political speech as department speech, right? And so I think it's a nice win for us and a good set of arguments to make. The challenges on campuses are not just about students behaving badly. Students take their cues from faculty, and the past year has not been the academy's finest hour, as we all know. We've seen some really horrible cases of faculty justifying and rationalizing Hamas. In some handful of cases, cheering on Hamas, calling Hamas exhilarating. And we've also just seen, like, just faculty lose their senses. And I'll just give you an example from Penn, where a faculty member in rhetoric and was posted under a pseudonym these horrible anti-Semitic cartoons, tried to say it's satire, and after it was exposed, I mean, students knew it was him. And we share this with administrators who we work with, because we thought it was a great rejoinder by President Jameson at Penn, who was interim at the time. And he said, like, I'm not going to respond to everything, but I'm going to respond here. And he called it out as a personal affront, not just this is something that affects the Jewish community negatively. He said, I am personally offended by this. We raise it because we want to tell the administrators we work with that you can express disappointment in the faculty. You can express chagrin in your faculty. Like, why did you make this choice, not another choice? Right? You can certainly express criticism and condemnation when it's warranted, but certainly chagrin, I actually love that word, and a couple of administrators told me that that is a great word to use, just to say faculty, whether doing it privately or publicly, like Jameson did. This statement went out to the entire Penn community. Just say, like, what the heck are you thinking? The students are hurting. Why are you doing this? Right. And it's sort of an expression of disappointment and dismay in the faculty. We are seeing that can have an impact. Maybe it's not for the very long term, but in the short term, it's sort of a slap on the wrist and faculty may think twice next time. We also saw last year stuff like this, where especially junior faculty, instructors, like graduate students who become instructors of record when they're ABD, or TAs who acted irresponsibly, really, or bordering on professional misconduct, canceling classes and giving extra credit to go to the encampment, bringing anti-Israel material into a class that has nothing to do with the Middle East. In many cases, when administrators and other senior faculty looked into it, they found that the faculty members did not know that this violated university policy. One thing I was told when I remember when I came to Syracuse, a senior faculty member came to me and said, Miriam, there's only one thing you have to do, and that is show up to class. You have to show up to class, and so, like, you have to show up to class. And if you can't, you have to have an explanation, right? So there's student FaceTime hours, and these young academics just thought they could abrogate that, right? And so it is something that now administrators are telling faculty that these things are not acceptable, and certain kind of lobbying is not acceptable either. I want to share Faculty for Justice in Palestine, because you do have a very active FJP chapter at Rutgers. This is also very new. This is post-October 7th. This network launched. I believe, I don't really have hard evidence, but I believe this was a project or a campaign that was on the shelf and was just waiting for the opportune moment in time. Because when the US campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel launched this network, right away there were like 25 chapters within the first week with websites, and I can tell you, like, designing a website costs 25 grand to do it really professionally and to keep it maintained, and And yet they had all this financial support and all this money and backing to do it. And I'll tell you that academic boycott is in every mission statement. We've looked at all the mission statements. There are now like 150 plus chapters, and they all embed academic boycott in the mission statement of these faculty clubs. Um, and some are worse than others. Um, the goal is to have one for all the 300 SJP chapters around the country. So we anticipate more will pop up this year. They are affinity groups. They don't represent departments. They're not an academic unit. There's nothing wrong with faculty forming clubs or affinity groups. But this network, because of the organized nature and the materials that are moved out, is going to create more divisiveness on campus, more organized anti-Israel activism on the campus coming out of the faculty. So the mission statements, the activism is very concerning. Here's just a smorgasbord of different kinds of activities that are being promoted and being sponsored. There's an explicit effort to pit these faculty and Faculty of Justice in Palestine against openly Zionist students and faculty. So this is not just sort of a cultural club where we're going to uplift the Palestinian community on campus. There's an explicit effort to actually downlift or downgrade or demean or pit themselves against the Jewish and Zionist community. And one campus in Illinois, our faculty members found that the Faculty for Justice in Palestine group had shared a manifesto that urged all the members of the chapter to not sit on university committees with colleagues who identify as Zionist. Can you imagine that? Like, someone say, I'm not going to sit on a I don't know, a P&T committee or academic affairs committee, whatever, because you're a Zionist. So our faculty members shared that with the administrators, and they couldn't believe it. And they actually called for a meeting with the leadership of that Faculty for Justice in Palestine. And again, it was sort of like, what are you doing? And there was an assent, like, you are not going to be able to use university official channels if you keep doing this. We're going to like remove you like from, being able to use the listservs or emails or, and so they stopped. It was like kind of a one-off. Then at UMass Amherst, you can see this People's Assembly. This is actually happening literally this week, where the faculty chapter has its name and its logo on a publicity flyer for this event that features Layla Khalid holding a rifle. So again, this isn't just, it's not students, like, this is faculty at UMass Amherst putting their name and their logo on promotional material that features a terrorist with a rifle. So as you can imagine, our faculty members at UMass Amherst are deeply engaged as we speak with the administration about this. And what it means for the campus climate. So that's my snapshot of the campus landscape. And Cynthia had asked me if I could share just for the last few minutes what we do at AEN to address these issues. So I just have a couple slides and I'll run through that. And I know Cynthia and Stacy have the PowerPoint, so you're welcome to have that and look at it later. But we immediately within the first hours of the attack on Shabbat, on that Saturday, October 7th, we don't work on Shabbat, but I called the entire team in. It was an emergency, and we wrote an email that afternoon to members saying, we're really concerned about what this is going to mean for campuses. So, like we're not prophets, but we sort of anticipated that things would not be easy, and we need a lot of resolve and resilience. And within just a few days after the attack, we had already contacted hundreds of members. We were operating on many campuses. We were connecting with administrators. We were sending out materials to administrators. Faculty were getting talking points and information fact sheets, and we were sharing that with administrators, our network too. Then we had to decide, what kind of strategies we would pursue, because we only have 7 staff, and we needed to figure out how we were going to cope with all the work. And so we decided we would have to, strategize in terms of like in a national way. So the first thing we wanted really strong statements from universities, and we provided our members with templates that they could use. In the second stage, we decided we were going to really focus on campuses where there were demonstrations in which the publicity material featured a terrorist hang glider. And you can see that on the slide. In mid-October, there was a national campaign of Days of Resistance, and we focused on the 40 schools where it was this material with the hang glider that was being promoted. And the reason we focused on that was because this wasn't something that the students came up with. This was coming from the National Student for Justice in Palestine Toolkit, which was a very offensive and anti-Semitic document, and it was marketing material created by them. And we provided all that information to our members on those 40 campuses, and all of them engaged on that. They shared it with administrators, they shared it with other colleagues. Pretty much every pro-Israel faculty statement or open letter or petition that you saw last year was spearheaded by AEN members. And we brought in about 10,000 signatures from faculty around the country that way. We're in sort of phase 3, where we're dealing with faculty unions like you are, professional associations, activity and disciplines. We just had a major win at the Modern Language Association, which I can tell you more about later. We had to devise ways to get more counter programming to schools. We utilized our sections that became force multipliers for us. We have a working group of faculty on Christian campuses, and they were pushing out a lot of material. Many of our members took to social media for the first time in their lives. We had faculty who had only been on Facebook that suddenly want to go on Twitter. We had faculty that really got more engaged in social media and in writing. And we just tallied it up, over the course of a year. We had a lot of content being pushed out. In the months after October 7th, with just 7 staff, we were fielding about 200 requests from our members every week. It was so intense. We had to do triage. We had to create a whole system of triage. I spoke with a physician here in Syracuse about how you do triage when you have like a volume of people, but you only have the same staff, and he shared a system, and we implemented it because we just had so much volume of emails and phone calls. And but we managed, and we got a lot done with our members. Our administrators needed a lot of work. We partnered with other organizations like the Brandeis University Initiative, and just to try to, uh, amplify our voice as a small organization. We were able to reach a lot of people that way, and we put out a lot of material. This document, fact sheet on the slide, actually went out to over 5,000 administrators, and many of them said they used it with their staff. They shared it in October and November and December, those early months, and people found it very helpful to have that document. And lastly, I would just say it's been a wake-up call for faculty nationwide. We always had faculty who work together. JFAS has been around before October 7th. But after October 7th, we just had so many faculty who wanted to organize and be visible, and they created groups. There's at UCLA, Jewish Faculty Resilience Group. At Columbia, there's Faculty and Staff Supporting Israel. There's new groups at NYU, at Penn, at Maryland, at Illinois, and so many groups were forming. We decided we needed a network of the groups. So we launched the Faculty Against Antisemitism movement. It's been really exciting to see this grow. We are now engaging with 50,000 faculty around the country through our social media. We've had 20 million impressions on our posts. We are on Instagram for the first time. We're thinking of moving into TikTok. We have, thousands they're not AEN members. The AEN members are handpicked. We grow by about 50 to 100 a year. They are our doers and our movers and shakers, but they need allies on the campus. And so we're really tapping into this silent majority with this movement. And we marched in the New York City Israel Day Parade for the first time. So there's a lot of activism that's happening. Our faculty want to be walking billboards against anti-Semitism. And that gives me hope. I think a lot of people are just fed up and they want to take their campuses back. So thank you for listening to this around the nation experience of what students are experiencing and faculty, and what we are doing about it at AEN. And thank you for all your work at Rutgers and beyond. So I'm going to stop the share. And
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for this. It was very informative. I hope we can run over just a few minutes because we're actually approaching 5, but I would love to get in a few questions. So people who might want to ask a question, I see Rabbi Esther Reed's hand is up. So I see yours. First, I'll call on you. And you can just, if you don't mind, just unmuting yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for this terrific presentation, Miriam. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sorry about my voice, recovering from a cold. I actually had so many things that came up during your presentation, but my question is for my colleagues here at Rutgers rather than for you specifically. When you were talking about university departments using their websites for political speech, I'm curious if any Rutgers University departments have political speech on their department websites. I honestly don't know. Miriam, I don't know if you know, and I wonder if our colleagues here on the call might know. Thank you so much.
I'll just say I don't know about the websites, but I believe Women and Gender Studies has issued departmental statements, which are sort of similarly problematic. JFAS has urged the administration to put forward a policy that would explicitly forbid that in the name of academic freedom and institutional neutrality. The administration's position is that would have to go through, I think they said, the faculty senate or something like that, which means it wouldn't happen.
Right. On some campuses, the Senate has been supportive of this. And, I think that having faculty participating in the discussions is important and as part of shared governance. It should be something that all faculty should, it protects all faculty, right? So it's not just this issue, it's all issues. I do remember that a few years ago, and it's great to see you, Rabbi Reed. Thank you for all your efforts on the campus. You may recall that it was that Center for, and I forget, so race and migration or whatever.
Center for Security, Race and Rights.
Yes, where they had, or some staff member had put a series of very inflammatory video clips on the official website of the law school. And the law school, it went through committee but eventually the dean said, get that off. And it migrated off of the law school website to the center's website. So, you know, there is material that is you know, questionable whether it should be on an official Rutgers University website in that center. Which, you know, and again, you can have your own website somewhere else that's not affiliated with Rutgers and put it there. You know, I get like Rutgers, it's not unique. There are other campuses where it's been fighting tooth and nail to try to get these department statements off, and in other cases, it's been easier to do it. And in some cases, departments just don't do it, which is great. You know, you have departments that just don't do it.
Yeah, Laura, I'm going to call on you in a second. I just want to respond. I actually introduced in the University Senate a motion for a charge to be considered about departments and the university as a whole not making political statements. And I'm afraid the committee that it was assigned to has rejected it. It hasn't yet come before the full Senate. I'm hoping with others to prepare an argument to defend it, but the fact that the committee has already turned it down doesn't bode well for it being successful. Laura, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I help with managing all of the websites for School of Arts and Sciences. So I kind of have a hand in all 120 of them. I don't know every single one of what they have, but I am very attuned to if I notice something. There are statements on racial injustice. There are statements that were made after George Floyd. I have not seen any specific statements on Hamas, the Hamas war. There are events that are posted that are kind of disturbing to me, but I know I don't have the power to not post certain events that happen. Even the Cinema Studies website, which has nothing to do with the Middle East, but they have freely posted some past events, you know, but that's maybe covered under freedom of speech. But I know my group has not been charged or told not to put anything on if we see anything of concern.
Well, I mean, if you want to take on the issue of department statements, you've got a lot of backing from other universities now. You're not going alone. You know, there's precedent for that, and certainly relying on institutional neutrality is going to help. And it is a trend now, a very popular trend. You know, you're not like, you know, bucking the curve or being an outlier here. You know, see what happens. Maybe push that committee or share what other public universities are doing, and ones that are very committed to academic freedom and free expression, by the way, like the California system, Illinois system, right? So is coming out of faculty senates to support this.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other hands raised? I don't see any hands, and we're pretty much at time, but Miriam, I want to thank you very, very much for being here. I want to thank all the people who are participants for being here. We have a lot of work to do, not only on this campus, but around the country, there's a tremendous amount of activity still going on in the wake of October 7th. So thank you very, very much. And I think some of the board members of JFAS will be staying online right now to have a conversation with you about moving forward and what we could do to help people at Rutgers.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for everything you're doing to make the campus a welcoming, inclusive place for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to say that there are a lot more people on the call. They're just not on camera. Just that you'll be aware that there are a lot many more people.
I know, I see
Okay.
them on the screen with, yeah, no,
Thank you
that's
very
fine.
much.
It's fine. Feel free to reach out too if there's any other questions.